Conjuring Universe continues to grow with The Nun 2 officially out now. Jumping into it, spoiler warning if you haven't seen it, just in case. Welcome back to I Just Watched. I'm Joseph. Let's discuss The Nun 2, set in France. It is the sequel to the first The Nun, and technically still a prequel to the series overall, because it will be the second movie in the chronological order that is the Conjuring Universe. There's parts or visuals in this movie that are amazing. Like, it had a creepy tone, a creepy feel, and so if something crawls at me, I'm out skis. Like, I love me some spooky, scary shenanigans. The movies, the shows, they take me places. All right, I love watching them. I like trying to get spooked, and most of the time I don't really get too spooked. There's moments or scenes or like jump scares that I'm like everyone else. But if it crawls, I'm out skis, I'm done skis, someone come save me, please. And there's a moment in this movie where this stupid goat crawls nonsense. Like, it only knows how to crawl, but it's like a man goat. It's basically like a demon. It's a demon goat. It's a devil goat, basically. It's a demon. It's a demon goat. And it crawls, and that's all it knows how to do. And I like the score aspect of it, because when it was crawling on screen, you heard it, you felt it. It sounded heavy, powerful, like a rampaging bull kind of thing. So that was cool. But when it would crawl, I was like, I don't know. Please stop. I don't like it. And there's moments that, like, from the jump, when the nun, Valak, the demon, is murking people, breaking necks and blood splattering and lighting folks on fire, my nephew and I looked at each other and said, oh, bro, she mean business this time. And I say this because I think this movie's a letdown. I think the visuals and the feel of this one have a bit more of a creepy tone. There's some more intense scenes, like when the little boy is beating his mother to death with, when you go to church and they like spread the smoke and they has sacre bleu thing. I don't know what they say. I apologize. It's something in Latin usually. But then they smoke on the little chain ball thing. It looks like a mace. All right, a chained mace is what it looks like. And that's how the homeboy used it. That part, I was like, sweet Jesus. So there's moments in this movie where I was really caught off guard. And I enjoyed that. But it's a letdown because the story seems so much less cohesive than the first one, where the first one was missing those really crazy moments to make you be like, oh wow, this is mind-blowing, I didn't expect that, or oh, I can't believe I'm seeing this. Where at least that story felt more cohesive. It felt like it had more of a point, and it felt more so like a setup to the future movies that pre-exist, like The Conjuring 2 that has to do with Valak. I say that because in this one, you're working your way towards the end. They bring the relic idea back, but they also bring back the idea of the blood of Christ, but through the wine, it's through your faith. And then they kind of tease that Sister Irene may be a descendant, the saint whose relic it belongs to, the blind saint something, I forgot her name, but the blind saint. It felt like they were trying to give us 3 different plot points or endings, and they couldn't pick one. This is where it starts to lose you, or it definitely started to lose me. Because in the end, they have the relic, she grabs it, the little girl, it starts to glow, and she's like pointing at Valak, like, oh cool, like, we're about to win. But then Valak tricks him and grabs it, activates its power, and then becomes this giant shadow entity with like aura of light behind it. You're like, oh, we lost. So in my head, I was like, oh, this is going to be an interesting ending. The way Valak stays is we lose this fight, thus Valak stays existing on our realm, thus leading to Conjuring 2 in like 20 years. Because I think that's like the 70s or 80s, 30 years, because it's in the 50s. I thought it was going down that route, and that would have been amazing. I would have been sold with that. I was like, ooh, that's crazy. And the whole selling point in the trailers and the posters was like the darkest story yet. That would have been crazy. I would be like, oh, we lost. It doesn't end there. She becomes this more powerful entity, but nothing really changed. She didn't do, or Valak didn't do anything more powerful, more scary, or crazier, because everything else that nun had already been doing just kept happening. There wasn't a bigger change. The goat was already running around before she was able to steal the essence of the holiness from the relic. Maurice, aka Frenchie, was already possessed in her henchman, so nothing really changed other than her becoming this like semi-titan sized shadow figure with this aura, and then picking up Sister Irene and starting to burn her. But then this is when they show you this flashback to her mother, and she's like, you always had my eyes. So they try to tie it into her being connected to the saint, because the saint wouldn't burn in the lore or history. And then Irene was on fire, but then she stopped burning. She's like, oh, is she connected? Maybe this is how she defeats her. Is she gonna like give up her eyes too, going down that route as a descendant? Psych! Remember earlier in the movie when we said the blood of Christ is the wine, or the wine is the blood of Christ because of your faith? We're gonna go down that route. Suckers. And then she prays with the new nun who was just there for exposition. I call her Sister Mary Clarence because homegirl was smoking. She clearly didn't want to be a nun. There's no point for her to be there. They touch the wine and they start praying, and it becomes the blood of Christ, and that washes over Valak, and that seems to kill Valak. That's literally the ending. And as mixed up or jumbled as it feels me delivering it is how it felt watching it. Like I said, the first one at the very least had more of a setup with, you see the upside down cross on his neck, because you know, if I remember correctly, in Conjuring 2, the little bit that we get in the beginning of them dealing with a different exorcist is the exorcist of a Frenchman named Maurice, who is a farmer, which was teased at and led up to in the first one. That's what I remember. In this one, at the end, it looks like they washed their hands of it. Maurice seems 100% okay with his new family. I'm assuming he's gonna go become that farmer, but there was no glimpse or real setup or tease or some kind of little bit to be like they didn't win again. Alex still somehow is attached to Maurice, and that leads to The Conjuring 2. Because they do show us an after credit scene or mid credit scene where you see Ed and Lorraine answer the phone, and he's like, you know, we need your help, and he's like, okay, and like it's basically, that's supposed to be the tease to them, I guess, going to that farmhouse for the exorcism. That is me connecting it because I've seen the movies. I know a little bit about the real life story, like, so that's me connecting it. If you know nothing, if you haven't seen the Conjuring movies and you've only seen the first one in this, you think it's done. So seeing that little tidbit, you're like, okay, like where does it go? And that scene was a scene that was removed or not used for The Conjuring 3. So it wasn't something they did for this. It was just thrown in to kind of add that essence of it. I didn't really like that. Overall, I don't think this movie is that rewatchable, really, because the story loses itself. I think in the beginning, it takes a sec to get going, but then once it does, they're giving you this lore, this mythos. The nun is going to work, and it's enjoyable. It's a really good movie in that aspect, especially for, you know, the spooky season, because there's mad jump scares. As the story develops, it just loses itself, thus losing me. Would I see it in theaters? I wouldn't really highly recommend it. I mean, I'm a big fan of The Conjuring, and I love the fact that it's a spooky universe that's being built. So I would recommend it if you are a huge fan of spooky movies, if you love horror, you enjoy the Conjuring universe, and yeah, I'd say go watch it in theaters. You'd probably enjoy most of it, but overall, it's not that rewatchable. It's a kind of a one and done. If I end up watching this again, it's when I'm going down the chronological list of the Conjuring universe, because I like to do that. It's not because I'm trying to rewatch this movie because I loved it so much. Same thing with La Llorona. I'm not trying to watch that. But for the list, I will. I want to hear your thoughts. Have you seen it? If you haven't, are you going to check it out? Comments, questions, concerns. Do you agree? Do you disagree? How do you feel about it? Did you like The Nun or The Nun 2 more? Which one would you prefer? I love hearing from y'all. But until next time, stay safe, be well, y con mucho amor. Adios.